Hi, I'm Jackie Miller. This is David Reevely with the report from Ottawa City Hall. Well, pot was on the agenda again this week, as it probably will be for months, if not years to come. The city solicitor prepared a memo for councillors to try to explain to them both some of the complexities around the issue and what decisions they have to make. One thing that emerged this past week was the question of where people will be allowed to smoke pot. Now, the provincial government is changing the rules to allow people to smoke basically wherever they can smoke tobacco by aligning the cannabis rules with the rules in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So that means you could smoke in parks, open public spaces, and on sidewalks. However, it's more complicated. It's always more complicated because the City of Ottawa has a bylaw which restricts smoking in city parks and on municipal property. That pretty much leaves it to the sidewalk where people will be allowed to smoke pot, and some people don't like the idea of residents of our city strolling down the sidewalk smoking a joint, including the mayor. He says he is not in favor of people smoking pot in open public spaces. So it remains to be seen whether the city can indeed pass a bylaw to prohibit people from smoking pot on the sidewalk. They might have to also prohibit them from smoking tobacco on the sidewalk, and that would cause quite a ruckus.
You know, there'd be hardly any place in the city where you could smoke a cigarette at that point, I think.
Well, I mean, that was the original problem with the Liberals' pot legislation, which would ban smoking pot in any public place, which led to the dilemma of where are people who don't own their own homes supposed to smoke pot. So it's not easy, and it's even more complicated in Ottawa, of course, because we have so many layers of government, including the NCC.
And what's the NCC doing about telling people where they can smoke?
The NCC, which owns, as you know, many of the major parks in the city, as well as the bike paths, does not have a formal policy on smoking in its regulations. It's a federal agency, so it trumps the city agency. So the city bylaws on smoking don't apply on NCC land. However, when the NCC rents its space, like for instance it rents Confederation, are you, okay.
It's wild.
Let's just say it's very confusing, and hopefully it will be sorted out eventually. So, what about the election coming up very soon?
That's the other, we got a couple of big dates coming up in the next couple of weeks. The election is October 22nd, and it's getting down to it now. There are I think city councillors who are concerned about their jobs, and there are challengers who smell blood. A big thing that has happened in the last couple of weeks, but especially just in the last few days, is some of the challengers have started releasing their lists of donors, which is unusual. It's not a thing we've seen very much of in Ottawa before. A few candidates have done it, sort of proved that they're not bought and paid for, but we have a record number of them doing it this year. I think 8 so far, more promising to do it later. And I think this is a really valuable development. I mean, people always suspect that their councillors are corrupted by particularly developer money, but sometimes other sources of funds. And knowing who your candidates are being funded by before an election can be really helpful for deciding who you want to vote for.
Absolutely. How much do candidates usually spend on an election campaign?
Council campaigns, it depends how many people are in the ward. There's a separate limit for each ward, and they're told what it is before they start. It's usually between $20,000 and $30,000 for a fully funded campaign. Some candidates spend a lot less than that. Campaign for mayor is into the hundreds of thousands. Not as big an issue because this campaign isn't as competitive. But running a campaign for council is expensive, and you can't fund the whole thing yourself, so you have to get donations from somewhere. Who's paying for it? Well, that's a question voters probably deserve an answer to. And so there are politicians who really don't raise very much money, and you can make your judgments about what that means about their campaigns yourself. We've only seen these disclosures from a few candidates. There are well over 100 in this election, but with any luck, this will be a trend. We're seeing more of it this year than we ever have before.
Heritage issues. What happened this week?
Yeah, that's been the other thing that has actually come up at City Hall. Things have been dying down a little bit as the election's been heating up. City Council gave final approval for the demolition of Magee House, which was that building on Wellington Street in Hintonburg that partly fell down over the summer. It's built in 1881, but I guess was not being properly maintained, and water got into one of the walls, washed away the mortar, and then abruptly the wall fell apart. So it's a shame that the building can't be saved, but the city has an engineer engineer's report saying that going in there to try to rebuild it would be too dangerous for anybody to do. So council's approved tearing it down by the middle of November with the proviso that some of the stones be saved and put into a replacement building someday. There'll be a plaque. But the actual building itself is, if you want to get a look at it, do it soon because it's not going to be there for very long.
Okay, otherwise you'll just be able to see the plaque.
Yep.
And maybe a few stones. Thanks, David. I'm Jackie Millers, David Reevely at Ottawa City Hall. See you next week.